I'm here with Andrea Ferretti. She is the founder of Yogaland. And we're going to start off just by with Andrea giving us a little background about you, about your history in the yoga world, and how you came up with Yogaland, etc.
Sure. I'm a longtime yoga practitioner. I started doing yoga, in the mid 90s. So it's been a little over 20 years. And it was kind of a slow burn. It took me a few years to really commit to it regularly. And it was when I went to my very first Ashtanga class that I was really hooked, because at that time I was young and I had had a dance background and I wanted something really physically intense. And it offered me that intensity, but with this level of compassion that I had never, ever experienced in the dance class. And I can remember that very first Shavasana and I've never been a recreational drug user. It's just not my thing. But I can remember being in the first Shavasana and thinking oh, I think this is what it must feel to be on a really good drug trip. It just felt so great. And that kind of hooked me. So once I started doing Ashtanga, I started to commit to more of a daily practice. And after a couple of years of that, I realized, I was working in the .com industry in publishing. And I realized that I wanted somehow to have yoga be the focal point of my life. I wanted it to be the centerpiece of my life. So I did a teacher training. I did a 200-hour training. And it was one of those trainings where you do weekends. So it was 6 months of weekends. And toward the end of that training, as I started panicking, oh my God, how am I going to make any money? How am I going to do anything? What am I going to do? A job came up at Yoga Journal, and I had been, of course, watching that very closely. They were in Berkeley at the time. So a job came up at Yoga Journal for a web editor. And I mean, that's what my background was. That was what I had been doing for years. So I applied for that job and I lobbied really hard for it, and I got it. And I stayed at Yoga Journal as an editor in one form or another in different mediums for over a decade. So I was there for a long time, and then they moved to Colorado, and I was freelancing for a little while, and then I just decided, well, a few things happened. I mean, I got a breast cancer diagnosis, so I went through treatment for that, and that really changes your whole perspective on things. And I just decided it was time for me to do my own thing with yoga. And so I started doing work for Jason and working on our blog, but I also really, really wanted to do my own project. And that's how the podcast came to be. That was the spark of how it happened.
Yeah. So what inspired you to do something more of an audio podcast? What actually gave you the idea to come up with Yogaland?
Well, a few things. I mean, first, I always loved the reporting aspect of journalism when I was at Yoga Journal. And I actually wonder if most journalists will say this. The reporting aspect is so fun because you're talking to experts and you're just having a conversation. You get to ask them whatever you want. Imagine that, talking to people that you really admire and people who are so immersed in their subject matter. That was the most fun part. The writing part is the hardest part, just sitting down and synthesizing all the information and then editing it down. And it takes a lot of time and steadiness of thought. And I'm a mother to a small child. My husband travels a lot. I was fitting everything into these small windows, and writing was getting harder and harder. And when I was doing my radiation treatment for breast cancer, I fell in love with podcasts. I listened to Serial every day, Sarah Koenig's Serial every day that I would go to radiation. I would listen to it, drive home, listen to it. And I fell in love with that format. And I fell in love with the idea of being able to do the reporting without having those conversations edited, without having someone boiling everything down to a soundbite. I really wanted to do long form and just allow people to hear those conversations that I got to have with people day after day at Yoga Journal. That was how I really focused in on doing a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Bunch of different things.
No, I love it. Yeah, I love it. And then with is that why you also choose audio versus a video? Instead of doing a video interview, you choose more of an audio video, or why one over the other?
Yeah, I guess it's funny. I didn't even consider video. Mm-hmm. I think probably for me, there was more of a barrier to entry for video. I knew once I started to get really into podcasts, I started listening to like how to create your own podcast. And I knew it was pretty easy to set up, technically easy to just kind of do on your own and run with it. So that was one reason. But the other reason was really that I wanted to do this long form. And, some people do long form videos, but I think most videos are sort of packaged and put into like a course or put into, or, if you're watching a video on Facebook, you want it to be like a minute and a half.
Right.
You don't want it to be 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour. Whereas podcasts, you're really in people's head. You're in their life. They listen to you on their commute or when they're taking a walk in the morning or when they're at the hairdresser. There's just so many opportunities for people to really get deeply immersed with audio. And that was more of what I was interested in doing.
Yeah. It actually reminds me of when I was listening to one of your podcasts, which I love, or like, it reminds me of NPR, like with like the sound bites. I love the sound bites like on NPR. And then I noticed your sound bites like in the beginning and like in the middle. So I was wondering, how do you even incorporate that and like what type of equipment do you use or how do you even create
it? Yeah. So, I mean, the great thing about starting a podcast is you can be really basic like me, or you could, create a more complex sound system with like a mixing board and things like that. I don't do that. I just have a Blue Yeti mic, which you can see right here, and this little pop filter. I use my laptop and I record the calls via Skype. So using this program called Call Recorder, which is really cheap. You buy it online. I think it was like $30. So I record this is a USB mic, so it just plugs right into my computer and record the call. And then I do have someone who produces the audio for me. So he'll go through and do any little cuts that I might want, or if I like laugh really loud into the microphone, he'll quiet me down, things like that. And I think you can really learn to do this on your own as well. I wanted to have one thing that I farmed out because I do everything else myself. And I wanted it to be done really well. He'll also add the music. I tend to select the music from Free Music Archive, which is, just royalty-free music. And so he'll just pop the music in there and that's pretty much it. It's a very low maintenance operation.
Yeah, no, and is it really easy to use like a platform like iTunes just to load things up? Is it easy to become like someone who offers a subscription?
So I joined a network called Acast. So and they will help you distribute your podcast to the different platforms. So I've mainly been on iTunes, but finally, I'm finally now up on Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud. I think those are the main ones. And so if you go to acast.com, I just kind of emailed them and said I have a new podcast, filled out a little form, had a few conversations with them. And so I do my uploading through their platform. And what the nice thing about that is that I get analytics. So I can see my daily downloads and I can see the countries that people come from and I can see how long they listen to the interviews, which is great because you don't get any of that from iTunes. And they also they sell the ads for me and they insert the ads and work on that aspect. And then it's a revenue share with them.
Okay. Yeah. So when, can you also see which one works, where people are listening most, if it is from like Google Play or if it is from iTunes?
Yeah.
Most listeners are coming from?
Yeah, exactly. You can see what their platform is. You can also see like if they're on an Android or on a mobile, iPhone mobile device, or if they're on a Mac or so it does break down all of those different things for you. And then you can see where your traffic is coming from, which is all from our website.
Oh, is it really? Is it mostly from your website, from Jason's website? Or both?
Yeah.
Oh,
jasonyoga.com. Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. You can kind of geek out on it.
Yeah. I'll also see it like it when anytime the two of you like send out like a newsletter. That's where I see like, oh, let's see who the upcoming like who this next podcast is with. So it's nice seeing that.
Yeah, I had thought I should do a separate newsletter for the podcast, and there are certain like sort of branding people who would probably argue that I still should. But Jason and I just think like everything that we do is sort of a family business. So we're just keeping everything together.
Yeah, well, it's nice seeing that too. It's nice seeing you, like, even though he is maybe traveling, teaching, and doing this, and you're doing the podcast, it still is very much like a togetherness and a family business, which is really nice. It's really nice to see rather than just like an island.
Right.
Itself. It's really nice to see you both working together.
Yeah. It's been good for us. It's worked out well so far.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that. Because I noticed that in the yoga world, and that's one of the things that that Cassandra and I were talking about, is that a lot of times as yoga teachers, you can feel very isolated.
Absolutely.
And especially, I think that's one of the things that can be, I mean, this is a separate conversation, but that can be hard, I think, probably in marriages and whatever else. If someone's dating a yoga teacher or married to a yoga teacher, they're always off and they're so busy. But it seems like a lot of times if you can work together, then it makes things a lot easier, I think, for the relationship and everything.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I don't know how we would do it if I didn't have a yoga practice at all. Like, right. Because it is so much of how we live in the world. It's just, and so it is just a nice bonus that we get to work together and we get to work on something that we're both so interested in. And yeah, sometimes we do have to consciously say, like, we're not talking about work in this conversation. Right. We're not talking about our child. Okay, then what else do we have to talk about? I'm not sure.
What else is there? What else?
But you have to work on it. You know, you just, yeah, for sure.
What it's nice is you're both also bringing in two different aspects, where he's bringing in, he's very kind of straightforward. He's very much of a straightforward teacher as far as teaching, like, about the yoga practice. And it's really nice because I feel like you're also bringing more of like an emotional side, Thank
you.
I love that. I love that.
That is exactly what I'm trying to do.
No, I love that because it's actually kind of getting in the heads of like what is going on with a yoga teacher or other people within the yoga world. And so I think it's a really nice, no pun intended, like marriage of the two. So
yeah. Well, one of the things that I've learned from doing the podcast is it's helped me define a little bit more of myself. I mean, working for Yoga Journal for so long, I always just, I did things within a construct, within a whole paradigm of like who that editor was and what we were working on and what our goals were. And certainly some of my interests played a part, but it wasn't fully my voice or my ideas. And so it was a little scary to start out doing that in the beginning. And as time has gone on, it's funny that you said it, because in the past month or so, I've been like, you know what I'm really interested in is the emotional and the psychological side. That is really my personal passion, is how yoga can help us just live happier lives. And I think the way that it does that is the self-awareness piece, and that starts in the yoga room. It starts with our bodies and with the asana practice. And then hopefully, as we develop self-awareness, like the mind-body connection happens. And then we start to like have tools for dealing with our emotions and with our thoughts and with the way that we interact with people and the way that we conduct our relationships. And so that definitely is my personal interest that is really fun for me to talk about in the podcast.
Yeah, well, it's nice because it also just gets in the teacher's head, knowing that, some of the people that you're interviewing, they actually are human.
Yes.
They have emotions and they've had struggles. And
yes.
I honestly feel like that's actually what people relate to.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I actually can relate to this struggle, or, oh, wow, they have these insecurities as well, or this is what their thoughts. So I think it's very important. It's a very vital tool for yoga teachers, and just taking away the veil. Like, we're all human beings, and this is what we struggle with, and it makes things a lot more relatable.
Good. Yeah, that's absolutely. I mean, when I started it, I also thought, I saw behind the veil all the time at Yoga Journal with teachers, because I got to just pick up the phone and talk to them. And it gets harder and harder to do that with social media. Like, there's just more and more imagery of just like the shiny, happy, and we all have to do it. Like, we all have to market ourselves and put our best foot forward. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But this format of being able to have just a real honest, down to earth conversation lends itself to allowing people to be a little bit more vulnerable, which I think is really nice. And like you said, just getting to know that we're all in this together. We're all. Doing our best. We're all doing our best.
Yeah, we really are. We really are. And I love it. I love it. And then also I was curious, like with your logo, like how you created that. I think it's so cute.
Oh, thank you.
Logo with the,
Yeah. I hired my friend to do the logo, a woman who was a designer at Yoga Journal, and we're just really good friends. And I told her that I wanted it to be really graphic and not too feminine. I wanted it to just be very gender neutral. And that was really the direction. Oh, and I kind of had originally wanted like a little bit of the San Francisco skyline with the tower, because I think that's like broadcasting from San Francisco. So she just took that and ran with it. She came up with the colors and she came up with the font, and, we went through just a typical design process where she gave me like probably 6 different options, and we went back and forth and then landed on that final one. And we chose the blue, that bright blue with the yellow, because we thought it would really pop on iTunes. And then we thought it kind of, it integrated well with Jason's color scheme on the main Jason Yoga website. So I hired out to do that. I think it's wise to make a few small investments. If you want to do a podcast, like an investment in a good mic, an investment in your branding, just really basic branding. And then, for me, I made the choice to invest in this audio, the little audio help that I have every week, someone helping me do the audio editing.
Mm-hmm. So they do the editing, and then you have someone else. I can't remember the company's name that you use that actually uploads it to Google Play and to iTunes. They're the ones who actually upload it to these different online platforms. Is that?
Yeah, it's sort of like I have to do the initial setup. Mm-hmm. with the platforms, but then every week I upload my podcast into their tool. They have this online tool, and then it disseminates into the accounts that I've set up.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Right. Okay. And then they're the ones, they actually choose the ads. They're the ones who actually choose the ads that will go before.
They do. Yeah. So because I'm still a relatively small podcast, I have certain stipulations in the contract, like no cigarettes, no alcohol. I think that, no meat. But they don't do cigarettes and alcohol anyway. They don't go after those advertisers. So there are a few stipulations in the contract, but otherwise, because I'm small, they will sometimes choose the ads that are just pre-recorded. If they find a sponsorship for me, if they find a sponsor that wants to be on the podcast, they'll let me know, and then I'll record, the ad, the host read ad. And I have turned down, I'm not going to name who it is, but I have turned down a sponsor because I didn't feel like it was aligned with what I'm trying to do. And they were great with that, which was great because I'm a really small podcast, and it's hard for them to, they're trying to help me, and, you want to work well with your partners. But I was really pleased that they were willing to just still send me ads, even though I turned one of them down.
Yeah. What's nice is you're keeping, with your own integrity does this actually work? Does this feel right? You have to. Otherwise, it's kind of like you just get down this slippery slope. And I guess that is one benefit of having worked in the publishing world. I just know you don't want to go there. Like if you know that something doesn't feel right, doesn't feel aligned, doesn't align with the values that you're, talking about in the podcast itself, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. It doesn't feel right. And then you lose the trust of the people who are listening to you. Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, it's like, it's just not going to make any sense. Right.
Yeah.
And for your, for the podcast, like, how do you choose who you're going to interview? Do you have like a list of people, or do you create that list, or you just kind of look out there in the yoga world, or?
Yeah, it's a combination of things. I mean, before I started, of course, I had so many people that I wanted to talk to because they were all people that I had talked to over the years at Yoga Journal and gotten to know. I find that all of my creative processes are just like incredibly organic. So I don't have, it's funny. I see these like online courses of how, writing workshops and how to do this and how to create this. And I don't know how people do that, because any creative endeavor that I've done has always just been really listening to my gut. So, as I look forward, what I try to do is I try to be efficient by doing things in kind of a bulk way. So I will look at like the next few months and say, okay, summer's coming up. What are some topics that might be helpful to people or interesting to people? And then slot guests in according to those topics. Who do I want to talk to? Who has a book coming out? What have people been talking about in the Instagram comments of my feed? What's resonated really well with the listeners? Like all of those things kind of come into play as I develop my upcoming list. And I kind of do it in like 2 to 3 month chunks. And then I send all the emails out to those people asking if they're interested in things. And then I start doing the work of like slotting them into interviews. And then I tend to try to do a lot of interviews at once and then produce things at once. It's kind of the only way that I can do it, being my one-woman show.
Right. Yeah.
And keeping it going every week.
So you create the topics first, and then these are the topics I want to talk about or I want to engage in. And then you, based on those topics, then you...
Somewhat. Like I would say like 50% I try to come up with a topic, and 50% is like, I just really want to talk to that person. Like next week, I'm talking to Jason Niemer and of Acro Yoga. And it's just like, I just love him. I wanted to talk to him forever. He travels all around the world like a crazy person. We've been emailing back and forth since January trying to get a date. And we finally got a date on the calendar for Monday. So, I'm developing a topic around him because I just know him and love him and find him really compelling and inspiring.
Yeah.
So it's a little mix of everything in editorial planning.
Right. And then for the people who are subscribed, the people who are listening, what has the feedback been like? What has that been like for you? Or how is that?
It's been amazing. It's been sort of beyond what I could have imagined. I've been really grateful that, I started this as kind of a way to scratch my own itch, just to feel like that this is not out there. I would love to have this information out there. And it's been really gratifying to see that other people feel the same way. Other people have just written in and said like, this inspires my practice every week, or it gives me ideas for teaching every week, or it helps me feel more connected. I live in a small place, or I live in far away, but where yoga is not as big a part of my culture, but I feel like I'm part of something. And that's been really awesome. And it's also been really awesome because I'm not sure that Jason really thought it was going to fly, and so it's kind of like, okay, honey, you can start this project and we'll see how it goes. And he's been just overwhelmed with, he went to the New York Yoga Journal Conference and he called me after his class and he's like, he was joking, of course, so tired of people telling me how much they love my wife. Whatever happened to loving me? People would come up to him after class and just say, tell her we love the podcast, because he gets to be at these live events and I don't. So it's been really nice in that sense for us to see that this little idea that I had is resonating with people.
Ooh, that's actually a great idea, is doing at a live event, actually doing an interview there and having it be recorded there. That would be
great. We're going to do that. We want to do, we're going to do a live event at Love Story Yoga in San Francisco sometime soon, hopefully a fundraiser in the fall.
Oh, good.
Yeah. I'm planning it right now, and we have to get the fundraising piece worked out. So, but that's the goal, is to have it be a fundraiser. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds really nice.
Yeah.
So then besides, there's iTunes, Google Play, and actually you said a lot of people are finding out about the podcast through Jason's website or your website. So is that, how do you advertise it any other way, the podcast, or how do you let people know that Yogaland exists?
Yeah, we haven't done any paid advertising yet. And I have to admit, it's just not my forte. Being in the content world for so many years, we were very separate from sales and marketing. So I kind of feel like that's where I need some catch up, or I need some help. And so for now, we use Jason's platform, and my platform, we use just social media, Instagram, Facebook, and then our newsletter. And then we put it on our site. And that is what we do so far. I'm not ruling out the possibility of doing paid advertising. I just am not quite there yet. And the podcast isn't really quite making the money yet to invest there. So we're really relying on sharing and word of mouth and kind of the viral aspect of it. Yeah. Yeah.
And if there was a yoga teacher who wanted to create podcasts, let's say they didn't want to go, that was actually another question I had for you. Yes, you choose audio instead of video, just because that's what you were used to, that's what you resonated with. And then if there was someone else who wanted to create podcasts, and it might just be yoga class podcast, or maybe not be, maybe interviews, but it might be something else. What are the pros and cons that you would say of creating podcasts versus putting your yoga inspiration or whatever else out there into the world?
Well, there is the pro that podcasts are just kind of all the rage right now. I mean, I think everybody is excited about podcasts. So there's a really big audience pool out there. And there is not a whole lot of yoga content out there right now. So there's room, I think, for if someone's interested in doing a yoga podcast, I think there's room and there will be listeners. So that's great. I think it's also a really great way to define your own voice. So, as I said, when I started the podcast, I was accustomed to being under editorial direction, someone else's editorial direction, and not having that was a little bit of a learning curve. And I kind of had to push myself out of my comfort zone to start doing it. But over time, it gets easier and easier. And you start to really just understand the message that you want to convey. It just really boils things down. And so that you understand oh, this is my message. This is really what I want people to know. These are the values that I hold, and these are the things that are important to me. So I think any kind of publishing that you do on a consistent basis will help you with that, will help you define your voice and your message and what you want to get out there. I think it also creates community. So if you are feeling a little bit isolated and just I'm doing this slog on my own, it's a nice way to connect with people. I will say that Jason and I had the advantage of already having his people to follow us. So I think it can be getting your gears started in the beginning, and creating that community can take some time. So you have to be patient. But as I said, I do think that there is a listener base out there, and there's not a lot of that content. So that's great. And then also just getting yourself into a vertical, right? Getting yourself into a form of media that is not super competitive yet can be a great advantage for yoga teachers. The con is that it's not a huge money-making field right now. It's the way that you get paid for advertising is the CPM model. So if people are familiar with print advertising or even online advertising, they'll know what this means. It's cost per thousand. So you get paid an advertiser will pay you a certain amount of money per 1,000 downloads, right? And it's not a huge amount of money. It's $15 to $20 per 1,000. So think about how many thousands of downloads you have to make any money. And then for me, because I'm signed with a network and they do all that advertising legwork for me, because I'm not set up to do that myself, it's a revenue share. So I share, they get the majority of that cost per 1,000.
Oh, right. Wow.
Yeah. So it's it is not a super lucrative thing to start out in unless you had a huge audience to begin with, or unless you were really, really good at getting PR and getting press and getting yourself out there in that way. So it really has to be kind of a labor of love that you commit to, and you kind of see where it goes and how it benefits you, and maybe a supplement to another income. Yeah.
But I also like how you were saying that it is, an area that's not really competitive right now. I mean, that's, and it's probably with other things, with YouTube, with other platforms, that at first it wasn't competitive, and then it got more competitive, and it might be such an advantage that you are doing these podcasts now.
Yeah.
And as time, things will grow. And it seems as you were saying, that there's been such a really great response for podcasts.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You're right. It might get to the YouTube phase where it feels like, and in fact, when you asked the video question, that was one of the reasons I didn't consider YouTube, because I felt like, well, everybody's already done it. I don't even know where to begin. There's so much content out there already, whereas I don't really feel that way with podcasting, and you can get creative and do things your own way.
Wonderful. So is there anything else you'd like to add about Yogaland, or anything else that you would like to let people know about creating podcasts, or about your journey, or anything else?
Well, I would say definitely, if you're interested in doing it, do it. And especially, I think we need a lot more women's voices in podcasting. If you go to iTunes and you look at the top 200 podcasts, you'll see very few women in the top 200 space, which is honestly shocking to me. There are plenty of women doing podcasts. So I just kind of rally for the more women producing their own media, the better. The more of those voices that we hear, or any marginalized populations, the better. Get your voice out there, and let me know what you think of Yogaland. I love to hear from people. It's really helpful.
So people, they can just go to, where would they best go to find you and find Yogaland, and learn about that, and learn about your blogs also. You have such great blogs as well.
Thank you. Yeah, well, everything is really centralized on jasonyoga.com. So if you go to jasonyoga.com, you'll see a button for podcasts, and you can click on that. You can click on our blog. We just launched a shop, which is exciting.
Ooh, that's nice.
So you can click on our shop if you want swag. What was that?
Oh, is it apparel?
Yeah, just like t-shirts and tanks. And when I created these Yogaland tanks for guests, like when I first started the podcast, and I would mail them to guests and after they were on the show. And when we put them up on social media, people were like, "Oh, send me one. I want one. Where can I get one?" And I had this like really limited run. So I thought, okay, I'll start a shop. And then it became this like big project. And so we've got some fun stuff up there. But you can find everything on our website, jasonyoga.com.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Andrea. I really appreciate you taking time to educate us and enlighten us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura. It's really an honor to be here. I hope it's helpful to people.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks.